Hey everyone, this is Dr. Drizzle, and welcome to the National Parks Expedition Challenge. Today we're in Mammoth Cave, which is in south central Kentucky. Now, the place that we're standing right here, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but just know that we're a little less than a mile inside the cave and a little less than 200 feet underground, which is pretty exciting, but what's even more exciting is our guest today. Our guest is Jennifer Shackelford, and I met Jennifer online a few years ago, right when we started this National Parks Expedition Challenge, and she was one of the first ones that raised her hand, and now we're finally here 2 years later. So Jennifer, thank you so much for letting us come to your home.
We are so happy to have you all here. We love this challenge that you all are doing. It's very exciting.
So we have about 600,000 kids that are participating in these challenges on a regular basis, maybe even a little more now since we've been out of school for a while. But Jennifer, so we're going to start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to this particular park.
Okay. Well, I grew up in the area, and the section of cave that we're in right now, Gothic Avenue, is actually what I remember from my childhood. I came here on my 4th grade field trip, and I remember the ranger bringing us into this passageway and looking at the signatures and the stalactites and all that's around us, and I thought it was one of the most amazing places I'd ever been. So from that point on, I decided I was going to be a park ranger, and I went to college and got a degree in Parks and Recreation with an emphasis in environmental education, and I really found during college that I loved teaching. So when I graduated, I took a different path for quite a while. I went straight back to college at a different school. Got my undergrad at Eastern Kentucky University, which is about 3 hours from here at Mammoth Cave. Came back home and got my master's at Western Kentucky University, which is right down the road, and became a school teacher. So for 9 years, I taught in the public school system here in Kentucky. And after a few years, I was able to get a summer seasonal position here at Mammoth Cave. So I would teach school during the year, and then I would take people on cave tours in the summer and work with students doing summer camps. And eventually, I was very lucky to get a permanent position here at Mammoth Cave as the education specialist.
So Jennifer, tell us about the history of the park, like when it was first discovered.
Okay. Mammoth Cave was actually, the legend says, first discovered in the late 1700s. There was a young gentleman by the name of John Houchins, and he was out hunting for food for his family. He had a big, long Kentucky rifle with him, and they say he saw a bear. And he pulled back and shot at that bear. And some people tell the story that the bear ran into the cave and brave John chased after that bear. Some people say that John was scared and the bear was chasing him inside the cave. So we're not really sure, and that's just a legend. But years later, we actually discovered that the cave was visited much earlier than the late 1700s. There have been artifacts found down inside Mammoth Cave that date back thousands of years to prehistoric people, Paleo Indians, that would come down in here and leave behind things sometimes. So one of the artifacts that we found in quite a few different places are old slippers that they would weave out of grasses that are found down by the Green River up on the surface. And then they would put those slippers on their feet, come in the cave, and sometimes they got left behind.
It's like a little Cinderella story,
exactly.
I guess.
Yes.
So I want to talk about when the park became a national park, but even before then, people got to tour this place. Is that true?
It is. In 1816, the owners at the time, it was a private cave, they decided to open it up to the public. And so people would come in here and they would go on cave tours, and hopefully you all be able to get some shots of some of these signatures in this area. Right around me, there are signatures from the 1820s, the 1830s, because the passageway that we're in was toured, close to 200 years ago. Over time, more and more people learned about Mammoth Cave. It was a very busy tourist attraction, 200 years ago. And so eventually, Congress even heard about it. And so in 1926, they decided, hey, we need some national parks kind of on this side of the Mississippi River. And so they decided that Mammoth Cave would be a pretty amazing place to become a national park. And over time, lots of land was purchased by different groups in the area and was donated. And eventually we became a national park in 1941. So we've been open for over 200 years to the public.
Well, we're glad that it's a national park now because that allowed us to visit.
Yes.
I want to talk a minute about these signatures. Now, they wouldn't be called petroglyphs, but what did you call them earlier?
Historic graffiti.
Historic graffiti.
Yes.
I love that term. So graffiti is not always bad. There's some really good places for graffiti. Now, if I wanted to do that today, though,
Oh, goodness,
and sign my
no.
name, could I do that?
No, because when we became a national park in 1941, of course, everything in here needs to be protected and preserved. That's the mission of the National Park Service, and so no more signatures. If you did it nowadays, you would get in a lot of trouble. It would actually be called a federal offense.
So I will not be doing that, kids, but I'm going to leave my mark here today just by being here and being able to come out of this cave more educated than I came in and be able to share that. So that's how we can leave our mark.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about the geology, the science of this park. Tell us about the rocks and the formations and all the stuff that just got you excited as a fourth grader.
Exactly. Mammoth Cave is a solutional cave. And millions of years ago, during the Mississippian time period, there was a warm, shallow sea right around here. And earlier, we were able to look at some fossils. So hopefully, I think you guys will get to see maybe some photos of those fossils. But they are left behind from that Mississippian time period. Now, there's no more ocean here. Things happened. Tectonic plates moved many years ago, and things shifted. Ocean went away, and we were left with hundreds and hundreds of feet of limestone rock. And limestone rock is a sedimentary or sedimentary, I tell students it's okay to say it either way, rock, and it's composed mostly of a bunch of crushed up seashells. So those seashells, just like our teeth, they have lots of calcium in them. And I tell students, you can get a cavity in your tooth if you're drinking soda and different things like that. And this cave is kind of like a really big cavity. So hundreds and hundreds of feet of that limestone rock. And then up on top, there's another type of rock. It's also sedimentary, but it's called sandstone. Okay. And that sandstone doesn't let water get down through it as easy. So over time, what happens is water, it collects on the surface, there's rain, it comes down, and it mixes with carbon dioxide. So I'm going to ask you, ma'am, if you'll please exhale for me. Okay, so we just blew out some carbon dioxide. And that will mix with that H2O, and it makes a weak acid called carbonic acid. So Mammoth Cave is actually here because of weathering and erosion. So I like to tell people the easy way to remember it. Weathering is breaking down, and erosion is moving on. So that water up on the surface, it collects that carbon dioxide, and then that carbonic acid starts weathering and eroding chemically this limestone rock. There's a reaction, and it breaks down the limestone over time, and you get a big cavity or a cave.
Well, we all have heard of stalactites and stalagmites, and I know my husband has little sayings to help him remember what they are.
Yes.
But can we talk about those for just a moment?
We can. So all around us, you'll see there are some stalactites that hang tight to the ceiling. They also have the letter C for ceiling, stalactite. These are columns right through here, and so down at the bottom you have stalagmites, G for ground, and you might trip over them. And when they meet in the middle, that's when you get the columns. But these formations are actually just a prettier type of that limestone rock. So calcium carbonate. If you imagine not using a coaster, and you sit your drink down on the coffee table, and it leaves a ring behind. That's sort of what happens here. So drips of water will end up on the ceiling, and over time, they sit there and they leave behind those minerals. And sometimes, that drip will make its way down to the floor, plop out, and that starts building up as well. So that's how these formations got here.
Do you have a rough estimate
water
of how long this took?
There's a lot of variables. It depends on even things as simple as how much rain, how much water is making its way down in here, and things like that. Hundreds of years for a cubic inch. So I've heard some people say 100 to 300 years per cubic inch is the formation, but there really is a lot of variables. So that's why there's such a big thing. So these formations took thousands. of years to form.
So I could actually stop the growth of this if I wanted
Yes,
to, which
definitely.
I'm not going to again. I'm not breaking the law, but how does that work?
Well, anytime we have visitors down in here, we're going to talk with them about how we don't want to touch the walls, the ceilings, any of the formations, because you have oils on your hand. You don't really think about it. But if you've ever pressed your nose up against a window, you probably notice, and maybe get fussed at if it was just cleaned, that you leave behind some of that oil. And so oil and water, they don't mix. So if you touch the formation and then that slow water starts flowing down through there, eventually over time it's not going to leave those minerals behind. It's just going to kind of zoom on past where your hand was at.
So no touching will provide better growing in here.
Definitely. Now, this area that we're in, right through here, it's very dormant. There, you've noticed there's not water dripping in. But there are other places in Mammoth Cave, like the Frozen Niagara. It's something you all could look up. And the Frozen Niagara, that section is a really wet, active part of Mammoth Cave.
Well, you just mentioned the Frozen Niagara, so we know that there are names for a lot of these rock formations. So let's now talk about what this is.
Okay, so this is called the Bridal Altar. And people used to get married down inside Mammoth Cave before we became a national park. You can actually search and find some very interesting pictures of people standing here, much like us, many years ago getting married. The legend has it on the Bridal Altar that the reason it's called that, it's kind of a funny story, is there was a young lady, and she had a gentleman friend, and she was very much in love, but her mother did not like this so-called gentleman friend. And so her mom was ill, and on her deathbed, she told the daughter, whatever you do not marry that young man on the face of this earth. He's the last man, don't do it. And so they say, years later, she came down under to Mammoth Cave, and she married that gentleman. But she didn't go against her mother's wishes.
Right, she said the face of the earth, not
Yes.
underneath. So this entire area is called Gothic Avenue?
It is called Gothic Avenue. It's also sometimes called the Haunted Chambers. You'll see it referenced as both of those in old documentation from the 1800s. And if you look around at the formations, you'll notice they are kind of dark and Gothic-like. And, I guess if you use your imagination, it could be a scary place. I think it's very interesting.
It's very beautiful, but I think you could make out some pretty interesting faces if you looked around. What is your favorite? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but I know you love the entire cave. But what's your favorite place?
Ooh, one of my favorite places, perhaps my favorite maybe, is on the Lantern tour section, the Violet City Lantern. When you get to the end of that tour, there's just a beautiful area. You're walking along, and you end up in this large room, and there's a set of steps leading up to help get you out of the cave, and you'll notice these beautiful formations that are hanging down. So that's probably one of my favorite places, but I love it all. It's very different depending on the section you're in, what it looks like, but I think it's all very pretty.
Well, one of the things we like to do in these National Park Challenges is to find something that the park needs, and then ask the kids out there to try to brainstorm an idea. So earlier you had told me that you have a challenge here that concerns groundwater. So tell me what the problem is, and then we'll see if the kids can solve it for you.
Okay. So in this area, the landscape, it's called a karst landscape, and there are caves and there are sinkholes, which are funnel-shaped depressions where water can very quickly get down into the cave system in just a matter of minutes and hours, which is very different from other parts of the United States. But around here, if somebody, for example, they change the oil in their car and they don't dispose of it properly, they take that oil and they just decide to throw it down on the ground, that could end up in Mammoth Cave and in our underground rivers, and then eventually out in the Green River right outside the park, which flows into other rivers, and it really affects more than just people around here. It affects the animals, it affects the people. So it's really important in a karst landscape area that we take care of our water. Everywhere we need to take care of our water.
Absolutely. So kids, you heard Jennifer's challenge to you. We want to see what you can come up with to help people remember that we have to dispose of our trash and our chemicals in specific ways so they don't end up in our water, which could harm us health-wise, what we drink, and then it could get into crops, and then move out into something that we eat. But also, we don't want it here, and we just want to take care of our earth. So here's your challenge. Create a prototype of something that could be used to filter water once you put it into a source. Maybe you want to build some receptacles that people can specifically put in things like harmful chemicals like motor oil and maybe even things that you use in your house, bleaches and stuff like that. But think of what you could do with those chemicals that would keep them out of our groundwater. Maybe creating and building prototypes is not something you are interested in doing, but you love social media. So you can come up with a campaign that will encourage kids, because if we get the kids on board, you know how it is. We can get our parents on board later. So a social media campaign that would encourage people to take care of the groundwater, especially around this area, because we want to take care of Mammoth Cave. So I'll be looking for that. We want you to tag on Twitter at @Daisha92 with the hashtag #NatParkChallenge. Jennifer, thank you so much for telling us the story of Mammoth Cave. Now, the story of Mammoth Cave is actually your story too, because you told us as a fourth grader you were sort of fallen in love with this place and it directed your path. So for fourth graders or anyone that's sitting in their classroom or at home right now, how can they get here? Can you just look at the camera and tell them?
Yes, I sure will. So this is what I would do if I were you. I would start reading about the national parks, reading about the different careers that you might be interested in. Not only could you be a park ranger who works in the education department like myself, maybe you really love science, so you could become a biologist or a hydrologist, especially if you wanted to work at a cave park. We have those here. And you could study about those different careers. Also, one thing that I did that was so much fun is I tried to find any type of science camp in the summers that I could go to. If you can't go away to a science camp, then you can always get online and you can read about those places or maybe find really cool activities. You can even volunteer in your local national parks if you have one, or at a place like your local recreation center. So we have students every year, a lot of high school students who will come here during the summer and they'll volunteer. There are even programs at a lot of national parks, like here at Mammoth Cave National Park, where you can stay here at the park and you get free housing as long as you volunteer for us. So that's something you should also check into. When you go to college, remember whatever your interest is, that's what you could major in, and almost every single career can be found in the National Park Service. I didn't realize that when I was younger, but a few years ago I went to Grand Canyon. They have helicopter pilots. They have a school there at the Grand Canyon, so there are teachers who live within the Grand Canyon National Park. So it's really interesting, all of the different careers that can be found within the National Park Service.
So Jennifer, what you're telling us is, if you want to work in the national parks, go ahead and start planning on it.
Yes.
Find your passion. It could be a hobby that you have now. You can turn into a career, and then it can be your passion for life. Now, Jennifer's only been here at this park working, but you never know. We might find her at another national park somewhere in the near future.
It could happen someday.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again, Jennifer, for allowing us in here. And I'm going to tell you, kids, this was really special today because we're the only people in this particular section. They roped it off just for us. So that was a special behind-the-scenes tour. We hope that you'll join us on our next tour, and we just want to say thanks again from 200 feet below the earth, about a mile from the entrance at Mammoth Cave National Park in South Central Kentucky. This is Dr. Drizzle and Jennifer out.